is the more visually oriented of the shorts. While most doesn't have lines, the characters still talk, just through movement. Mostly the idea is interesting, a robot walking endlessly while the world passes them by. However, the execution is lacking. At first, it's a being that will keep going no matter what happens, even if having some difficulty at times. There are some comparisons with a human being that could be interesting, like a robot coming out of a cloud and it suddenly disappearing. There is the origin of life being unknown and leaving questions. She's starting more childish, her hips even looking like a diaper in one of those winding toys, and discovering her movements until dancing, then only walking through most of the short. That is, people can end up stuck in a cycle to survive. The most interesting one for me is the focus in the middle of her body, showing she doesn't have a stomach. It could be just to show she isn't human, that is, has clothes, possibly cultural influence, but that's not her origin, but I read it as saying she doesn't have a stomach. At first, it could seem like the same, yet with no stomach, she has no biological needs. This informs the spectator she doesn't need to eat, pee, or poop, so she doesn't need to stop. Her walk could be absolutely continuous, making the weight of her existence much heavier. The only moment she seems to stop is when an atomic bomb explodes and makes her fart her last breath. On the other hand, she, and I call her a she just because her hips seem wider than her shoulders, though in the end she looks more like the little prince from the anime, she simply has no reason to exist. If the background behind her had a purpose, that would make sense, her being an excuse to tell the story of this world. But not only the story of this world doesn't have the cadency of history, with the occurrences having little relation between them, a balloon flies before we see dinosaurs on the clouds, and suddenly, bunnies. The idea that this would lead to something is lost because the conclusion is, pure and simply, a deus ex machina. In the end of this most lengthy of walks, an ethereal being passing by in the sky, possibly the former Little Mermaid, blows on Pierromon, Clown Man's cousin, and she magically becomes a human, now holding a twig like in the beginning, which wasn't seen for the rest of the short. This is an excruciating period of loneliness, and the reward is to continue alone? Really, what's the difference between being alone as a robot and alone as a human? Nope, it's just a collage of images that doesn't make sense. As the end of AI. By the way, yes, despite having been published 14 years earlier, this could fit as what happened after the end of AI. So why make sense? After this day with his mom, David walks without a purpose until a group of aliens decides to give him life. The aliens try to revive the fauna, but the DNA samples are mixed and they create the Wuzzles. Batman thinks he's an abomination, but the girl says the alien who gave him life is called Martha. He's killed while distracted, and the girl starts a project to rebuild humanity, creating chicken androids as she was, which would one day fight Superman at World's End.